Chapter 26. There was little else to recount of Dan's life at this point. He knew they had arrived at the end of his story, and his only concern was to find his family and rejoin Daniel. As they finished breakfast, Chippewa said,
"We have now covered as many years as it took to bring you to 2003, when your limo rental business really took off with the ordering and delivery of your Hummers. The next 4 years before we rejoin Daniel should be easy to cover in a couple of days. Yet before we leave, I would like to go over some of the things that will assist you in the future."
"Such as what?" Dan asked somewhat impatiently.
"Such as the suggestions you read in your book during your first visit of your past with your wife Malou."
"Do you have to go through that again?"
"Yes, Dan. I think it is important for you to recall and keep these suggestions in mind. You see, many of your successes were due to your following God's guidance."
"And him giving you indigestion," Gustavo put in, chuckling.
"Yes, Gustavo," Chippewa went on, "but many of your failures, Dan, or shall we say accidents, were due to your stubbornness or ignorance of the risks you were taking at the time. What's more, I believe that your patience has put you to the test on many occasions, but your determination has finally won the day. So I think you need to put the suggestions the book gave you in perspective. The other reason, and perhaps the most important one, is that one day you will grow old and you will need to teach your children what has made you the man you are today. You will need to be able to be a trove of advice and guidance. The book, your book, was not written for you alone. It was written for you to use as a guiding light when you lead your children into their future. As you said many times, you had to consider your life, your family, every time you made a move. However, now you need to pass the torch, as it were, to your descendants. Your eldest is well on his way to pursue his studies at university. Daniel is going to be the one who will need your guidance. And as for your daughter, Gabby, she too will need a lot of advice when she grows into adulthood."
Chippewa pushed his chair back and crossed his arms over his chest.
"So the question is, would you like to read these suggestions once again?"
Dan was of two minds about this. On one hand, he felt he had learned enough lessons through the retracing of his past and future that all he wanted was to find Daniel and return to Pahokee with him, Malou, Stefano and Gabby. On the other hand, if reading the book one more time would assist him in guiding his children in future years, he should perhaps spend the time to read it again. "Although, Chippewa, you made your point, but I hope you're not going to ask me and Gustavo to return to that old house and find my book again, because in that case I would say no. My book can stay where it is." Guffeting now, Chippewa said,
"No, Dan, don't worry. We're not going back to the old house to find your book. Actually, Solange and Damien have offered to bring it to you. If you're okay with reading it one more time, that is."
"Okay then," Dan agreed, "as long as we're not going to spend the whole day rehashing the same things." "We have no intention of rehashing anything at length," they heard Damien's voice say behind Chippewa while he and Solange appeared before them. Gustavo turned around and noticed immediately that they were no longer sitting in the restaurant, but at the terrace of an old house facing some mountains beyond. "Oh, hi," he said, smiling at the two angels. "Where are we?" "I think we will let Dan answer your question," Damien replied, focusing his gaze on Dan. He smiled and shook his head. "Yes, Gustavo, we're at the foot of the Jeseninkey Mountains at the outskirts of Sumperk in the Czech Republic, where my grandmother, my Abuelita's journey started on the eve of World War II. "Wow," Gustavo exclaimed. "Is that the lady? The one that interpreted your dreams when reading from an old German book?"
"Yes, the same one," Solange replied, sitting down beside her husband at the table. "And we thought it would only be befitting for you, Dan, to have another read of your book while remembering her immense contribution to your upbringing."
Damien nodded. "You're the one now, Dan, who's going to lead your children and possibly your grandchildren into their future while interpreting their dreams or desires in life." A pang of emotion hit Dan all of a sudden. He hadn't realized how much the book had meant, or would mean to him until that very moment. For him, it had been all an exercise in retracing his steps with more understanding of what his life had meant to date. But now he saw the book, his book, as the same one his Abuelita had been reading to him all those years ago. He stared for a long moment at the volume that Solange had now deposited on the table. "Are you saying this is the same book as the one my Abuelita had?" he asked, his voice trembling.
"We wouldn't say it's the same, no, Dan," Solange replied. "Yet it is similar in importance. It contains most answers to interpreting your children's dreams or ambitions in life. As you recall, it describes the tasks you had to accomplish to reach your goals. And now these tasks or the lessons they contain will be useful in the life of your progeny."
"May I open it then?" Dan asked, extending a hand to turn the book to face him. "By all means," Damien said. "Go ahead, it's yours to keep." "Mine to keep? Do you mean I can take it with me when we return to 2014? Dan was secretly hoping his guardian angels would agree for him taking it. "Yes, Dan. If this book is to be of any use to you, maybe it should find its place on your night table, shouldn't it? Damien smiled. I guess you're right, that's where Abuelita kept it. He looked at the book. The lock at the side was already unfastened, and opened it. The 12 Herculean Tasks of the Shepherd. You have been proven worthy of opening this book to this last chapter. Therefore you are now at liberty to receive the powers of the Dream Maker, those powers that will enable you to accomplish 12 tasks to assist you in reaching your goals for you and for your progeny. The first task will demand that you retrace your steps to the House of Mary and find answers to exercising tolerance and understanding. Tolerance will free you from the sin of obsession. Since you now understand what tolerance involves, your next task will be to find acceptance of all that occurs to you and around you. However, accepting your situation or the circumstances surrounding the event doesn't mean fatalism should invade your mind. Should you be able to accept all things for what they are or have become, you should also be able to fight for truth and knowledge. Therefore, you should now be able to accept what happened to you, deal with the consequences, and fight for your recovery. Patience is a virtue with which we are all endowed. However, circumstances drive us to foster impatience rather than its worthwhile opposite. If frustration is allowed to set in, your opportunities will become obstacles, and your goal will be farther than you ever expected. When you reach the level of patience required to tolerate and accept your situation, you will be on the road of your recovery, if such is your goal. There is much to learn on the road of accomplishing one's dream. Together with patience, tolerance, and acceptance, you will need determination to reach your goal. Giving up or quitting should not be part of your life now. Only with determination to reach your goal will you be able to have the patience, tolerance, and acceptance to attain your desired aim. Thus far, you have shown tolerance, acceptance, patience, determination, and even compassion toward your fellow man. Now it is time for you to face temptation and the indulgence necessary to avoid your falling at the grips of evil. Indulgence will steer you away from the wrong temptation. However, indulging in the desirable or appealing things in life could be detrimental to your well-being and could be very costly indeed. If tolerance, acceptance, patience, determination, compassion, indulgence, and temptation have helped you in forging your way into the future, perhaps endurance will crown your efforts with equal rewards. But remember, enduring the worst of life's torments require perseverance and untamable will. Your dream will be etched in these tasks, and none will be erased once you have attained your goal. Your tasks, thus far, have led you to the parts of your character that needed reinforcing or that needed awakening in the face of difficulties. In all things you will need humbleness, humility, to accept your fate, humility to be tolerant toward others, humility in the patience you will display, humility while facing your problems and your victories, and humility when attaining your goals. However, never forget that humility or humbleness of character is by no means debasing or demeaning. You should stand tall and proud of your accomplishments. If all the tasks you have accomplished thus far were enough to attain your desired goal, you wouldn't be reading these lines. However, and since you are in all that you will do, you will need perseverance. Perseverance is synonymous to persistence and force of character, which you will need in your future if you are to achieve redress of your present situation. But remember, perseverance is not in any way synonymous to stubbornness or arrogance. Leave these two to tumble down the mountain along with self-importance or egotism. Depending on the helping hand of others to assist you in your progress demands trust. In most things, one requires another or depends on another to reach a goal, so trusting in your fellow man will be part of this next task. All doubts and uncertainty toward the ones who will guide you to the shore of your goal should be set aside in favor of trust toward those more experienced. Remember, misguided arrogance or self-confidence will only spell trouble for you. As in the past, along the path of progress, you will encounter people who will annoy you and frustrate your desires for betterment. Although trying to be helpful, these people have provoked and will provoke irritation and undue fluster to your mind. Your task is to forgive those who will trespass against you, such as you did in the past. Yet forgiving others for their trespass should always be preceded by forgiveness of oneself. Since this is your 11th task and perhaps the most important one for you to remember in the days and months ahead, it is time to give consideration to what you have accomplished thus far. Fortitude and force of character was the crowning and underlying trait to all tasks you have undertaken to this day. Fortitude has helped you to be more tolerant toward others, to accept the hand you have been dealt, to endure the severity of enmity, to show humility in face of extravagance, to display determination in face of hindrance, to cast your eyes away from temptation, to persevere in your chosen task, to have the patience to pursue your endeavours, and to impart trust to deserving parties, and ultimately to forgive yourself for your misguided pursuits. Therefore, fortitude will assist you in overcoming all problems that may be ahead of you in this task. Remember, you are made of a cloth that will not accept defeat as an inevitable outcome. There will be time enough to reflect on what you have learned thus far when you return home, but for now, one last task is awaiting you. Commitment is another word for expressing the desire of keeping a promise. Nothing should tempt you to change your mind whence a promise is given or a commitment is made. Commitment is often taken lightly when it should be taken seriously. In this last task, you will have to demonstrate your commitment to achieving all of the other tasks with strength of character and unwavering will. Remember, all of the 11 qualities you have reignited thus far need your commitment to each and every one of them. Your full recovery and well-being will depend on your commitment to attain your ultimate goal.